No. We'll do it live! Fuck it. Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live! Thing sucks!
Welcome. Good evening, everybody. You know, my favorite part of that clip with Bill O'Reilly is the producer off camera who's like, okay. Oh, man, we got a lot going on. Never a dull moment. President Trump, the boss, responds to Spencer Pratt after his whirlwind trip to D.C. Politico then owns Spencer Pratt with a sick burn. California isn't paying for their wildfires. Bet you didn't know that. And some people need to have their Wi-Fi access removed permanently. Like, no more, dude. We're going to get into that. But just to give your blood pressure a nice little spike right out of the gate. We all know what happened a few days ago. And President Trump, he ordered that all flags at every federal building be lowered to half-mast through the weekend. I think this is a very uncontroversial gesture. I think it's a very obvious thing to do, given the magnitude of the national tragedy that we all just witnessed. But I guess Karen Bass has decided that she wants to force Los Angeles firefighters to fly their flag at full staff. This memo went out. This is an official notice from Karen Bass. All city flags shall be displayed on department facilities at full staff from 0800 to 1700 each day. Flags shall remain raised to full staff each day and should not be lowered to half staff unless directed by the mayor. Is this necessary? They're going out of their way to make sure that the flags aren't lowered. This is obviously a direct confrontation, not only with the president, but with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, which I think I'd like to say everybody would agree is horrible, but based on the reactions online, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are cheering it on because they're disgusting, soulless human beings. This is as if it weren't bad enough with Karen Bass, with everything that she fucked up, with the Palisades fire. I don't even know what to say anymore, guys. It's just, I don't know what you guys are doing in LA. I don't know how you accept this. I really don't. I don't know why there's not a recall. Anyway, you know, we get caught up in a lot of the politics and stuff. So let's try to step out of that as much as we can, but understanding that we're going to have to deal with some political stuff. So in order to just cleanse the palate, let's just check in on what's going on with fires, right? We haven't done that in a while. And the reason we haven't done that in a while is because it hasn't been very active. We have a little something going on up in Winters. Now, I spent quite a bit of time up there. If you recall the Hennessy fire, we've got a little something going on, probably in an area that burned in the Hennessy fire. Let's just see what's going on. Do you guys know the name of this fire? Do we know what this is? This is north of Vacaville. It doesn't look too big. And remember what I've told you guys about when you're looking at these. Oh, this has been burning for a while. Almost looks like it's a prescribed fire, to be honest. Yeah, I don't have any intel on this. Yeah, it doesn't look very significant. This might even just be a mulch pile, for all I can tell. But that's sort of par for the course. You know, when you zoom out, there's not a whole lot of active fires, not a whole lot of active cameras. And the Garnier Fructis fire is still kind of just chunking away, but they've been making some good headway. They've had favorable weather, and they've done a lot of firing operations. They're prepping for more firing. So, you know, I always say don't trust panic. It's for a reason. This thing's going to continue to grind for a little while, but they're making progress on the thing. And so far, we've had a relatively uneventful September, for which I'm actually very grateful. I think, like I said before, this year doesn't quite feel like it's got the juice. However, keep in mind, just like with 2019, which had a very, very small fire season, things really turned up once October came around. Then all of a sudden there was just a flurry of activity. There's the Easy Fire, there was the Kincaid Fire, there was the Getty Fire. You had a Palisades Fire, which was relatively small, but it was still scary. What else did we have? We had the Tick Fire burned right through my neighborhood. So things can accelerate rather rapidly. We had the last day of the month on Halloween, the Maria Fire. So just keep in mind, don't get complacent. Don't let this slow fire season lull you into complacency. Again, if you haven't cleared your brush, if you haven't cleaned your gutters, I don't know how you've gone this long without doing it, but make sure you do it before October hits, because things can get really ugly, and it can happen very quickly. I had an interesting reply from somebody today from one of my tweets, where I talked about how the Senate investigation into California's use of wildfire funds is going to be looking back into the last 10 fire seasons. Were there any suspect things that happened on any major incidents in the last 10 years? Or nothing to worry about? Now, I asked this kind of for a specific reason, not to be too coy, but I want to prompt people to reflect on the last 10 years of wildfire. And I include operators in this. I want operators to reflect on if they've noticed anything. Is there anything that happened in the last 10 years? Well, now's the time to get it investigated. So if you guys are firefighters or fire overhead or fire adjacent, and you're aware of any malfeasance on any of these fires, go ahead and shoot me a DM, and I can get that directly to Senator Scott, and they can look into it, because now is the time for accountability. But apparently, Cali Girl Sneaks doesn't think this is the time for accountability. Now, she said, "Don't we have more pressing issues?" Without a question mark. Where that time and effort, not to mention resources, could be used to help struggling Americans right now. And I posted this shot from the Palisades. I said, "I'd imagine for tens of thousands of your fellow Californians in the Palisades and Altadena, and, but for the grace of God, millions more, including you, lady, the state's continued failure with managing wildfire is a bit of a pressing issue. I've often said that wildfire is the biggest threat to our country. It is the biggest threat to our country in terms of national defense, but it is most pointed in California, because California politicians are busy keeping flags at full staff just to be a troll. And they're not clearing their brush. They're not even paying for their wildfires." I bet you guys didn't know that. Did you know that California doesn't even pay for it? Gavin's always bragging about how much money he spends on CAL FIRE. There's a reason he can afford so many helicopters, because he's not even paying for the firefight. Now, I do believe that wildfire is a very pressing issue. And I do believe that investigating the last 10 fire seasons is relevant and it's important. There's a reason for that, because I've always said past is prologue when it comes to wildfire. And if you want to fix something, you got to understand what you've been doing wrong. Okay? I have no problem with a senator from Florida and a senator from Wisconsin looking into this, since nobody in California seems interested in doing so. When Spencer and I went to DC, nobody from California, not a single politician from California, save for Kevin Kiley, showed any interest in investigating the problem with wildfires in California. And I do not understand why that is. Why are California politicians so uninterested in fixing this problem? They are the state with the biggest problem. It's crazy. Now, President Trump, on the other hand, seems to be suddenly very interested in fixing this problem. There was this today.
If we didn't go into LA a few months ago, you wouldn't have the Olympics there. They lost 25,000 houses to fires because they didn't have the water come down from the Pacific Northwest. They have a lot of water, but they...
Okay. It wasn't 25,000 homes. It was 14,000 homes. That's a level of granular detail that, I wouldn't necessarily expect him to have. That's fine. But he's talking about the water thing. He kind of gets it, but he's conflating two issues, right? The issue with the Palisades is that Los Angeles DWP drained the reservoirs, okay? The rest of the state had plenty of water this year. They've had plenty of water the last several years. And there is an issue with California dumping water that should be going to agriculture, especially in drought-stressed areas, and dumping it into the ocean. And they're doing it for this Delta smelt fish. It's just more of that insane, like suicidal environmental empathy that you get in California, where it's like team plant versus team human. In this case, it's team fish versus team human. And they'd rather give up all of their water for a stupid fish while humans are struggling to, nurse their crops. So look, that is an issue. And it is also an issue that there was not water available for the Palisades fire. However, he's mixing them up. Let's continue.
But they send it out into the Pacific to protect a little tiny fish, right? Which did very badly when it didn't have any water, by the way. Right. But just the whole thing is so crazy. You wouldn't have lost any houses. You would have had a fire. They would have had sprinklers going. They would have had fire hydrants. But they lost 25,000 houses. Now they want to build low-income housing where.
Now, just to jump on that, he's saying that, if not for sending all the water out into the Pacific, none of the houses would have burned. Now, I will argue that I do believe the outcome would have been significantly better for the Palisades if they had had water in those reservoirs, because the helisports were offline, and the copters are the most effective tool, especially right at the outset of the fire. That's the most important time. But there's another factor in that, when they ran out of water, people's hoses, they went offline. And so people who stayed and tried to defend their homes, they were then defenseless. And so were the firefighters. And they lost a ton more homes because of that, because the fire hydrants did run out of water. But the other factor is a lot of people left, and they shouldn't have left. They should have stayed to defend their homes. Because for the first few hours of the initial attack, there was water. And we saw how Brandy, fire photo girl, she saved somebody's home, and probably multiple homes because of the chain reaction from that, just by grabbing somebody's garden hose when nobody was up there, up on Anoka. And she put out a little spot fire in somebody's hedges, and that's all that it took. That's all that it took. So it's not all just one singular issue, but for him to say that no houses would have burned, there's a part of me that kind of agrees. I don't think homes needed to burn. I think maybe a few would have, but I think with an appropriate response and people staying behind and defending their homes, I think the damage could have been significantly less. I'll say that.
5,000 houses. Now they want to build low-income housing where many of those houses were. I don't know if you heard this. Yeah. This came in last week. Nobody's got their permits. The federal government, Lee Zeldin's incredible. He got, and they're much tougher permits. Everybody's permitted in California, in Los Angeles. Everybody has a permit to build their house, to rebuild their house, except the city and the state haven't given the permits. It's a long time.
Is this true? What is he talking about when he means federal permits? Since when do you need a federal permit to build your house in California? Well, what he's talking about, and he references Lee Zeldin, who's the head of EPA, he's really done a pretty solid job, I got to admit. And he did a great job in the Palisades, just like the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He did a great job. Now, what Lee Zeldin did was he was able to fast track the toxic removal permit. So insofar as having basically a Superfund site from all the Teslas that burned up and the solar panels, they had to remediate a lot of this toxic dust. Now, the thing is, as they're continuing to work in the Palisades, they might have jumped the gun on that. There's still a lot of toxic waste out there. And the issue is that they only scraped people's homes. They scraped in the footprint of people's homes. And they scraped about 6 inches of dust, dirt, soil. And that soil is contaminated. The thing is, like in Hawaii, when they did this same thing, because of course Hawaii had a whole bunch of Teslas and solar panels too. So, they have to do all this extra stuff on wildfires now that they didn't used to do. And they often don't do up in rural areas when, a town gets burned down, because it's just kind of wood structures going up. But now with all this green stuff, they have to treat it like a Superfund site. But in Hawaii, they scraped a foot. They only scraped 6 inches in the Palisades, and they only scraped in the footprint of the home. Okay, so that still leaves a lot of contaminated soil, and there's a lot of contamination in the streets and the sidewalks, and a lot of people who are getting contaminant tests, they're pissing hot for like beryllium and lead and mercury, a lot of heavy metals. that are obviously going to be a significant health hazard if we're trying to repopulate this area. So I think EPA needs to revisit the site and maybe do a little extra.
And the people want to build, but now
Why?
Newsom,
What's the reason?
It's the environmentalists.
because they're just incompetent. No,
That part is true. So when he's talking about how no building permits have been issued, it really is because of incompetence and just terrible bureaucracy. That part is right.
no, but it's really they're incompetent. They could avoid the virus. My environmental is much tougher than his. Everybody had it within 30 days. This is now over a year, and these people are standing outside the house. They want to rebuild the house. But in my opinion, even worse, they now want to take a large section and they want to build low-income housing there in a very high-income
Pacific
area.
Palisades.
It's unfair. I mean, it's unfair to the people. And, you know, they want to be politically correct, so they're seething inside, but they want to be politically correct, so they don't want to say it.
Isn't it interesting that Spencer Pratt goes to DC and talks about all these issues, and then one day later, the day after Spencer leaves, the president of the universe, the most powerful man in the universe, is then talking about all these issues that Spencer brought up. Isn't that weird? Crazy, right? Things are actually moving, and I'm really grateful that the president took this time. And obviously, this media hit has so much to do with, of course, Charlie Kirk and remembering September 11th as well. And there's obviously breaking news with the assassin taken into custody, and yet he still found it important enough to use some of his time to discuss what Spencer Pratt brought to DC. It's a big deal. And when I keep telling you guys that the feds are moving on this stuff and the feds are going to try to save California from itself, I mean it. And these people mean business. I'm telling you, they mean business. Now, more on the president's business. Do we remember this? This was President Trump's executive order from back in June. And this was essentially initiating the formation of FedFire, the National Wildfire Service. By the authority vested in me as president, by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered. Section 1 purpose. The devastation of the January 2025 Los Angeles wildfires shocked the American people and highlighted the catastrophic consequences when state and local governments are unable to quickly respond to such disasters. In too many cases, including in California, a slow and inadequate response to wildfires is a direct result of reckless mismanagement and a lack of preparedness. Wildfires threaten every region, yet many local government entities continue to disregard common sense preventative measures. Man. So the president calls out California specifically in this executive order. There's a reason for that, because as we've talked about all the time, California is the worst when it comes to managing wildfires. They are the worst, far and away the worst. And there's a particular reason for that. Gavin Newsom is a huge part of the problem. And the feds have determined that they need to do this work for them. They need to. Now, a part of this is streamlining federal wildfire. My goodness, my brain is fried, guys. Streamlining federal wildland fire governance, encouraging local wildfire preparedness and response, strengthening wildfire mitigation. Now, this to me is maybe one of the most critical parts, not just because I'm a burning evangelist, not because I'm always talking about how the fuels are the most important factor, because of course they are. It says, within 90 days of the date of this order, the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency shall consider modifying or rescinding, as consistent with applicable law, federal rules or policies that impede the use of appropriate preventative prescribed fires. Now, what you have to understand, for the longest time, I've talked about how because California is so bad, because Gavin Newsom is so terrible with doing prescribed fire, and he's constantly lying about what he's doing. Like, he'll say he did 90,000 acres. He actually only did 14,000 acres. That was 2020, ahead of its worst wildfire season ever. Gavin Newsom did like an eighth of what he claimed he was doing. Just shocking levels of incompetence and corruption. I've never witnessed anything like it in my life. What I've always said is the feds need to come in and just assert federal supremacy, because California blocks the feds from doing so much of the prescribed fire that they want to do, right? So Gavin Newsom will always talk about how the feds have 50% of California's forest lands. Now, forget the part that only 4% of WUI homes go up against federal property, right? And 40% of WUI homes are in the state responsibility area. So it's like, okay, yes, they have 50% of the dirt in California. But when they get a huge fire like the Garnett fire, right? Or the Gifford fire from earlier in the year, between the two of them, you've got what, 200,000 acres of fire? Who cares? Nothing's burning. Nothing's burning except some plants, right? However, when you get a fire on Gavin Newsom's Topanga State Park, it wipes out the entire Palisades. So the consequences of a state fire, fire in the state responsibility area, are exponentially higher than any fires in the forest with the U.S. Forest Service. And it's not their job to protect homes. Their job is to protect trees. That's it. And state government and state bureaucracy, they block the feds from doing prescribed fire. Now, this executive order is supposed to actually provide the framework for exactly what I'm asking for, which is for the feds to just say, yeah, we're disregarding CARB. We're just disregarding the California Air Resources Board. We need to do this. We're going to do it. We don't care what your local bureaucracies tell us. Like, we're going to burn. So I like this. I think they're actually going to do it. They're actually going to follow through. I think it's a good thing. But again, at the end of the day, you can do all the prescribed fire on Forest Service land that you want. Where you need it the most is around like state property, Topanga State Park, right? And it doesn't even need a lot. It's just targeted areas. Now, Gavin Newsom, on this tip, there's some interesting stuff that goes into the funding of wildland fire operations in California. Do you guys remember this interview that he did, if you call it an interview, this campaign press stop that Gavin Newsom did, where Sean Ryan sat and nodded his head while he just spewed whatever bullshit he wanted?
When you're saying that you're the one that's cleaning out the federal forest and that's the federal government's job
Hundreds and
to do
hundreds
that.
of millions of dollars we've invested doing the work of the federal government. 57% of the state's property is in federal hands. 3% are in state hands.
See how he does that? And yet, all right, he's always doing this shit. You don't need a forest around your homes to have a wildfire, right? So Topanga State Park is massive and it completely surrounds the Palisades. It's not a forest, right? It's a park, but it has tons of brush. So this is such a deceptive, bullshitty thing to do. To talk about how much forest land the feds have. He's trying to give you the impression that 50% of California territory belongs to the Forest Service and only 3% of California belongs to California. He's so skeezy. But remember, even with that, and like, again, the state responsibility area is not 3% of the state, okay? He's just talking about forest lands, right? So Topanga State Park, other areas that wouldn't count as forest lands. God, it's so skeezy. I hate when he does this stuff. But even with that, like I said, 40% of the homes, and those are the things that we care about not burning, 40% of the homes are in the state responsibility area. Only 4% of them are in the federal responsibility area, okay? So it's about consequential fires.
These fires, Camp Fire, the most deadly in California, started in federal lands. And this guy comes in and talks about raking. And he's serious about raking. He actually believes in it's insane. It's like, actually, honestly, just think about that, raking the forest.
And of course, this is exactly what wildland firefighters do. They literally rake the forest. I don't know why he's doing this. I want to try to skip
If he's
ahead.
talking about forest and vegetation management, he's talking about defensible spaces. We have significantly, I told you, 10x'd the investments in this space. I can't make up for 100 years of Smokey the Bear.
So here he is saying that he didn't 10x the amount of work. He didn't 10x the amount of mitigation. He just 10x the investments. I'm going to skip ahead to another clip.
towns being literally torn off the map. Greenville, California, Grizzly Flats, California.
And it's funny that he mentioned Grizzly Flats because that burned in the Calder fire back in 2021. And the Forest Service had a prescribed fire plan to try to protect that town. And it got stalled out because of California environmental bureaucracy and environmental groups suing the shit out of them. It stalled out for 10 years, never got done. And then Grizzly Flats got nuked. Okay. Just another example of the Kafka-esque bureaucratic nightmare that California is.
Obviously, Camp Fire and what happened in Paradise, California. I mean, it's serious. And we've
again, okay, this guy bailed out PG&E. PG&E started the Camp Fire, right? So PG&E, they lease that land from the Forest Service. If they have power lines running through a national forest, the same thing happened with the Eden Fire. So yeah, technically it started on U.S. Forest Service property, but that is leased out to SoCal Edison. And in the case of the Camp Fire up north, is PG&E. And because they do not take care of their equipment failed and started 2 devastating fires. And yet he's going to demagogue this and he's going to blame the feds. You know that the feds are suing SoCal Edison for starting the fire on their property.
unprecedented resources. We have the largest firefighting fleet, aerial firefighting fleet in the world. My state.
My state. We've got the most stuff. I've spent the most money. Do you know what a FMAG is? Who in the chat knows what a FMAG is? So an FMAG, it's a fire management assistance grant. This is a grant that comes from the federal government that will reimburse 75% of the cost of a wildfire. So this happens all the time. California has a fire, and it's not even on federal property because, of course, you don't need an FMAG. If you have a fire on Fed dirt, the feds are the UOP, okay? They are the ordering point for that fire, so it's on their tab. When California, the state, has fires in state and local areas that the feds have no responsibility for, the federal government will give them an FMAG and pay back 75% of the cost of fighting that fire. Did you know that? In some cases, the president can waive that last 25% and pay for 100% of the fire. Did you know that the federal government, meaning you taxpayers in faraway states, paid for 100% of the LA fires? Did you know that? Gavin Newsom did not pay a dime for the fire that started on his state park, that he didn't spend a dime doing any fire mitigation work on. And then when that firefight comes through, all those helicopters, all of those resources, even the cleanup, it was all reimbursed through FMAGs. Can you believe this, dude? He doesn't even pay for his own fires. So no wonder he's got tons of money for fancy helicopters. No wonder he's got tons of money for that stuff. He doesn't have to pay for it. He's like that 28-year-old perma student who's still getting money from mommy. It's unbelievable. Were you guys aware of this? Did you guys have any idea that the feds have been backstopping every single fire? I keep telling you guys, it drives me crazy that taxpayers in Maine and Vermont and South Dakota have to backstop his negligence in California. And so he's never paying for it. The feds are paying for every firefight in California, with very few exceptions. Every significant firefight in California, whether it's the U.S. Forest Service is the UOP, or even if the fire starts on state property, the feds are still paying for it somehow. It's unbelievable. And he's always bitching about how the feds don't give him anything. And keep in mind, of course, that California has the most federal resources positioned all throughout. They've got 5 hotshot crews on the Angeles National Forest. They've got like 48 hotshot crews. That's basically half of all the hotshot crews in the country are all in California. These are California dudes who he shits on all the time, these firefighters. The amount of money that the feds pour into California wildfires is unbelievable. Now do you understand? Now do you understand why it's important that the Senate is investigating where all this money is going? Now, there is some recourse for this. You guys may not be aware of the Stafford Act. This actually does give the federal government a lane to claw back some of that money, especially if it's the result of negligence or a deliberate act of harm, or if there's redundancy, right? So if certain things got paid out by insurance, that has to be paid back. There is potentially billions of dollars that California is actually on the hook for paying back to the federal government that's never been claimed. And now Senator Rick Scott is going to look back over the last 10 years of all of those FMAGs, and they're going to audit this. And they're going to see if California owes you, the federal taxpayer, money. How are they going to pay for it? California's insolvent. This dude spends like a drunken sailor. He spends like the trust fund baby that he is. Oh, man, it's going to be a really interesting few months. Now, the action from that executive order, it's probably coming on Monday. That's where we're going to find out like what the org structure of the new wildfire service is going to look like. But we'll see. Now, we talked about how certain people need to have their Wi-Fi revoked entirely. And if you recall, we talked about Luke Melcher. He's a construction guy who's now apparently a social media guy. And he initially got popular because he was exposing some of the problems with permitting in the rebuild process. And then he had some pretty dubious posts about, people squatting on people's properties. That wasn't really a thing. I think there was like one instance of it, but he tried to make it look like it was happening all over the place. Now, he met with Kelly Loeffler. She's the administrator of the SBA, and with Spencer Pratt. Here they are in a nice photo op in the Palisades. This was a great event. It was a great shot in the arm for the Palisades. She's going to try to increase the amount of money that's coming in to support the actual homeowners and the victims of the fire. But then Luke decided that while the body was still warm, he was going to try to grift off of the assassination of Charlie Kirk with this video. That's very pensive. So he's trying to make the assertion that Israel killed Charlie Kirk. It was the Jews. He's doing an "it's the Jews" thing. So he went from being a construction guy and talking about all the construction issues in Altadena and the Palisades, and he got a bunch of clicks, and now he's addicted to chasing the clicks. You know, he set up his podcast studio, and now he's talking about the Jews assassinating people. And he has like a little pitch right at the end after saying all this. It was really bad acting, by the way. Like, dude, don't quit your day job, dude. Follow Luke Melcher, where I'll talk more about how the Jews did it. And he deleted that video because a bunch of people told him, hey, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Like, this is crazy. Of course he's wrong. Of course everybody knew that that was wrong. We all knew who that shooter was going to be. We all knew it. Let's be honest. But the problem is he created an issue with Kelly Loeffler. Now these people have to distance themselves from a fucking crazy guy. He looks like a psychopath. This is not what normal people talk about. I know it's really popular on the internet to just blame Israel for everything. And it's just become absolutely fucking cartoonish. I always talk about how much I hate conspiracy theories because it's just such a distraction from the banality of evil. And I've had to deal with this in wildfire for so long because everyone always says Israel is shooting space lasers to start these wildfires. And it's the most obnoxious fucking thing on the planet. So I'm already like super primed to hate any of this stupid bullshit. And this guy, instead of deleting it, And instead of deleting this, where now Spencer Pratt has to be associated with this shit, where he's saying, my money is on Mossad. And of course, nobody thought it was fucking Israel. And we found out, of course, he was wrong. Now, you would think that he would be embarrassed and he would put his head down and stay in his lane. He posted this morning.
I've received an incredible amount of hate this morning. People calling me a Nazi, an anti-Semite, telling me that I should stick to reporting on LA fire news, as if I'm not allowed to have any opinion that doesn't concern the LA fires.
You're perfectly entitled to have an opinion. The problem isn't that you have an opinion. It's that you sound like a fucking crazy guy and you sound incredibly dumb. This is like the dumbest narrative that I can imagine. And yet he's doubling down on it. It's unbelievable.
All of this because I drew some attention to some facts, documented facts, that Charlie Kirk reportedly...
None of these are facts, by the way. It's completely made up. He was trying to assert that the Jerusalem Post had posted about the assassination before it happened. It's completely false.
Was afraid of being killed by the Israeli government within a month of his death. That within the last couple of weeks, he's been an outspoken critic of Israel, while up until this point, he's been one of their biggest supporters and advocates. And that the Jerusalem Post reported his death and that he'd been shot before any U.S. news outlet.
That's not true. It's completely made up. And you want to know the funny thing? Just to show how fucking dumb this guy is. Let's look at the original video. Let's look at this original video. I'm going to try to find the one spot where he's trying to show this Jerusalem Post article. Here it is. And he's going to circle this part coming up. Boom. He's circling this. That's how you know it's important. What is he circling? He's circling the timestamp. And this fucking moron doesn't understand how local timestamps work. He doesn't understand time zones. The other thing he doesn't understand is, see that word before Jerusalem Post? Reuters. That is a newswire, meaning the Jerusalem Post is aggregating this news from Reuters. This did not come from the Jerusalem Post. The Jerusalem Post posted something that came over the wire from Reuters.
I've received an incredible amount of hate of Israel, while up until this point, he's been one of their biggest supporters and advocates. And that the Jerusalem Post reported his death and that he'd been shot before any U.S. news outlet. These are just facts that people should look into. Doesn't make me a Jew hater.
No, it just makes you a fucking moron, dude. And the thing is, everybody was telling you, including myself and other people who are in the Palisades fire recovery movement, whatever you want to call it, the people who are trying to advocate for some positive action on the Palisades fire, were reaching out to this guy to say, hey, dude, what the fuck are you doing? You realize how many Jews there are in the Palisades? Do you know that none of them are going to want you building their fucking home, dude? And now the Trump administration has to distance themselves from this guy. Spencer's got to distance himself because he looks like a fucking lunatic and he sounds like a fucking moron. And everybody was trying to tell you, hey, man, stay in your lane, not because they're trying to defend Israel or they're saying you can't have an opinion. Dude, criticize the fuck out of them. Just don't do it like this. Do it in private. We were trying to save you from yourself. And it's like, okay, he deleted that first post. Good. All right, good. Don't do that again, man. Like, yeah, you're out of the circle now. Like, obviously, Trump cabinet members can't meet with you now because you're clearly a fucking lunatic. And this was the first indication that he was like off the rails. But then he doubles down with this. Like, dude, we were all trying to save you from yourself. I don't understand this level of stupidity.
And as it does relate to the LA fires, I think I'm entitled to an opinion that we shouldn't be sending billions of dollars to support Israel.
Okay, so now he's trying to make a connection to the problems in the Palisades is that we're sending too much money to Israel. And that's why the Palisades isn't getting rebuilt.
Their corrupt government, when we have people here in the US and in LA who just lost everything and could use those funds. So go ahead, shoot me, call me a Nazi. Not sorry.
Not sorry. All right. Look, I'm a big fan of the argument that we shouldn't be spending a dime overseas until you can eat off the sidewalks in downtown Los Angeles. I'm actually a fan of that argument. I don't think we should put a penny into any other country, no matter where it is, for whatever reason, until our country is spotless. Okay? So I'm sympathetic to that. But I don't think he understands how dumb he looks. And this is the problem, is that crazy people don't know that they're crazy, and dumb people don't know that they're dumb. We tried to save this dude from himself, and it didn't work. Now, speaking of other people who need to have their internet taken away, Politico decided to take a shot at Spencer Pratt.
Breaking news. I sent Rick Scott's office here in Washington, and we got the subpoena power investigator, Senator Ron here.
By now, you've probably seen Spencer Pratt getting political. If you don't remember him, maybe this will jog your memory.
You're the biggest poser in this town.
Pratt was a reality TV personality who starred in MTV's The Hills, the mid-2000s show about young people in Beverly Hills.
Okay, already off to a shitty start. See how they're trying to frame this right out of the gates? He's this obnoxious, over-the-top, C-list reality star from ages ago.
Now, after losing his home to the Los Angeles wildfires in January, his TikToks, which reach more than 2 million followers, sound like this.
Newsom, hey, the only bumbling idiots are you, Karen Bass, and the LADWP that let a town and 12 senior citizens burn to the ground.
Pratt's efforts to rile up California Governor Gavin Newsom and
Okay. Pratt's efforts to rile up Gavin Newsom. He's not trying to rile up Gavin Newsom. He's trying to prevent Gavin Newsom from fucking over his town. Because Gavin Newsom already burned down his town. Because Topanga State Park is Gavin Newsom's property. And it burned down the entire Palisades. This drives me fucking crazy. All of these morons who want to assign all these political motives to a man who's on a mission because his family's home burned down. His father's home burned down. He's probably never going to be able to live in the Palisades again. And he's fucking pissed off. This has nothing to do with politics.
LA politicians aren't falling on deaf ears. His vehement opposition to denser housing appears to have influenced the rebuild plans for LA.
Gavin Newsom let the Palisades burn and is now pushing SB 782. This bill would take our money to fund everything from low-income housing to explosive battery storage.
In one video, he targeted a law that would allow fourplexes on land zoned for single-family homes.
You need to stop SB 9 immediately. The Palisades, especially the Alphabet Streets, cannot handle more density.
2 days after that post, the governor waived the law for areas prone to fires. In June, California State Senator Ben Allen, a Democrat, introduced a bill to create an agency to rebuild homes that burned in the fires. He took pains to clarify that the government...
Okay, again, mischaracterizing it. Notice how they're adversarial towards Spencer, but they'll just take the word of these politicians. And this dude did not create a bill to create an agency to rebuild homes. That's not what he did.
Wouldn't use eminent domain to seize people's properties.
And that's not what people were complaining about. We weren't talking about how they're going to use eminent domain to seize people's properties. Nobody was saying that. They always do this, where they'll take maybe the one fringe comment deep in the comment section on one of Spencer's posts. They'll take some lunatic, and it's probably just one of them saying it just to like make everybody look bad. What were we talking about when we were opposing all of these housing bills? It's that they're going to add more density, and every single bill had caveats that would not just allow for more density, but require it. This isn't about eminent domain. This is about the plain reality that we know a lot of people are going to sell their properties. They're going to sell their burned out lots. And who's going to buy them? Who can afford to buy in an uninsurable area? you have to pay cash. You have to be cash. So that's going to be developers. And those developers are now going to have zero restrictions from building their high density high rises. Because of course, if you can make rent on 100 families instead of just one in a single family home, why wouldn't you do it? We weren't worried about eminent domain. We were worried about you guys opening the door for developers to destroy the area and add more density to a fire zone.
But then Spencer Pratt posted a TikTok.
I had to go to ChatGPT Pro, which gave me some very suspect answers. So then I went to Gronk 4 Heavy. It strips local control, creates a county authority that overrides city community decisions on rebuilding after the wildfires, centralizing power away from locals.
The next day, Allen pulled the bill. Pratt is now trying to kill an effort to allow 9-story apartment buildings next to train stations and transit stops.
We don't need more density in the Palisades, so you better take your little SB 79 back in the trash with SB 9.
Spencer may not have been aware at the time that SB 79 wouldn't apply to the Palisades. Still, the LA City Council adopted a resolution opposing the bill, but it passed in the state legislature, and it's now headed to the governor's desk. The bottom line is, Spencer Pratt is not always factually accurate, and that's causing a headache for lawmakers trying to address housing in California.
Okay. First off, some people aren't meant for video, okay? This is so fucking maddening. First off, he didn't say anything wrong. Secondly, look at the way that she framed it. He's not always factually accurate. And he's causing a headache for people who are trying to address California housing. This condescending, smug bullshit. You are causing a headache for all of the people in the Palisades who are seeking their own fucking housing. Why are we concerned about more high density housing when you've got 7,000 homes in the area that need to be rebuilt and you're the ones causing the headache? Now, on top of this, these morons didn't even know how to fact check this. This just shows how low the standards of journalism have fallen. I'm going to show you guys. This is SB 79. You can look this up online yourself. Now, right now, there actually is language in this that excludes the Palisades. How do we know that? Here's the section of SB 79. So is Spencer Pratt wrong? It says, sites within a very high fire hazard severity zone, as determined by the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, pursuant to section or within the state responsibility area. Okay, so those are two caveats where this increase in high density housing would not apply. It would be excluded in high fire hazard severity zones and the state responsibility area. Now, if you look at the map, here is the high fire severity areas. Okay, so it would include the Palisades and it would include large chunks of Malibu, but it does not include all of Topanga, which is why they added the state responsibility area, which then fills in those gaps. These areas that you see, the colored areas, that's the SRA. So when you combine those two and you overlay them, you actually have complete coverage of the entire SMMRA. So it is true that SB 79 does not include the Palisades. There's been a carve out for the Palisades and all of those areas, all those fire prone areas. Here's the problem. These morons don't understand how to read. If you look at this, if you look at the website where you look at the bill, you can see the bill analysis, the votes, the text, the history, and then you got to click on compare versions. And right here, these are all the versions of the bill as it's been amended. They clearly didn't go back to when it was introduced by Scott Wiener. If they had done that, what they would have found that the original bill did not have a carve out for these fire zones. In fact, none of these iterations had that. None of them. It wasn't until the 9th amendment, the 9th amended version of this bill, that they finally started to go, oh, wait, everybody's freaking out about us putting high density housing in a fire zone. Maybe we should have an exclusion there. And then they still had to amend it another several times. And it wasn't until the most recent version made a week ago, 6 days ago, they finally locked it in to where all of these areas that we just showed you on the map are now completely excluded. And these local municipalities, they have the ability to shift high density housing to other areas. No complaints. That's, dude, you want to pass it? Fine. I'm not going to have an ideological argument. And you guys satisfied the needs of the local residents of the Palisades who didn't want this in their area. They didn't want more people in a place where they already have trouble evacuating, right? And they don't want to have all of their housing replaced with high density infill. So look, this is a good outcome. I'm not here to wage an ideological battle. I'm here to just stand up for what's right, especially for the fire victims. And they amended it appropriately. I looked at the language in the bill. I think it's good to go. So if you guys want to have SB 79 for the rest of the state, that's not my fight. I understand people don't want it. I wouldn't want it either. But you know what? The voters are entitled to get what they want. They amended it properly. But the problem is these morons at Politico don't understand how the website works. And they didn't check all of these amended versions of it. And they didn't, if they'd done that, they would have noticed that these things changed after Spencer started bitching about it on TikTok. It was only because Spencer was shining a light on this that they actually made these changes. So you can look at the bill today and say it excludes the Palisades, but it didn't used to, and it only changed because Spencer was raising a fuss. And it just tells you that, like, guys, you cannot tolerate this shit. You need to speak up. You need to do what Spencer is doing and put your neck out there. And yet they still run this hit piece on him. And the way that they frame
Breaking
it,
news.
it's so sinister.
Senator Rick Scott's office here in Washington.
Just like from the start, it is so sinister the way they do this. And they're just trying to drag him through the mud. Now, I told Spencer he should call his attorney. I mean, they use some weasel words in here because they know what they're doing. Spencer may not have known at the time, right? They use language like that so they can try to avoid getting sued. But dude, this is unbelievable, the way they're trying to bash this guy. And it's just, this is like such an impotent kind of effort. When you compare her video to the kind of stuff that Spencer's putting out, it's like night and day. Dude, like, what's that expression? If you come at the king, you best not miss. If you come at the C-list reality star, you best not miss. This is like an absolute fail from Politico, also known as Bullshitico. It just blows my mind how these corporate press outlets are just supplicant lapdogs of power. It is unbelievable how they're always trashing the fire victims. Why? This dude is the only dude getting anything done. He is the only reason that they properly amended SB 79 to the point where now they can retroactively say that Spencer was wrong. Like, it's only this way because of these TikToks that Spencer's doing. We were in an interagency meeting in DC, surrounded by attorneys, surrounded by, dude, like, if I told you all the people who were in that meeting, it'd blow your mind. But I can't. And they're in the middle of detailing some of these issues that they've already uncovered, okay, that their attorneys have already uncovered with California. And Spencer, he interrupts the meeting. He's like, hold on, I got to do a TikTok. And everybody goes dead quiet. He grabs his phone and he's doing the whole Spencer thing, just like shouting into his phone, pointing at, whatever's on his green screen. And we're all just sitting there. Like, half of government is in this room watching Spencer blast out a TikTok. And then he finishes it. We're all just dead silent. And then he's like, typing out his caption. He's like, boom. And he like slams down his phone. He's like, all right, go ahead. Dude, it was like straight out of a movie. But the thing is, it's such an effective tool. Look at what he's doing. He's getting legislation changed appropriately in a good way. And the other thing is, notice like with the tone with this piece, how she keeps referencing how all these different bits of legislation, all these Senate bills, and then Spencer does a TikTok, and then they pulled the bill. Like that's a bad thing. Like, oh, look at Spencer. He's just ruining everything. We have all these benevolent politicians that are just trying to fix everything because that's what they're known for. They're known for fixing stuff, right? That's what they're known for. And so, and then they're removing these bills that would have helped everybody. Lady, why are you not asking the most obvious question? Why are they pulling the bill because Spencer is talking about it? If it's going to help people, why would they pull the bill? So because Spencer spoke up, they no longer want to help people? Really? That's why? Or is it maybe that because cockroaches scatter when you shine a light on them? And they were trying to, just like, dude, Scott Wiener is always doing this. Wiener is always trying to jam it through the back door. They're always doing this. And they're counting on you not knowing about it. And the reason they're pulling these bills isn't because Spencer bullied them from his fucking TikTok. It's because he brought it to light. And they were trying to slide this in through the back door, and he foiled that. And that's why they're pulling it. If these bills were actually going to help people, and these politicians were interested in actually helping people, they're really going to let a TikTok stop them from helping people? So because Spencer made a TikTok, they no longer want to help people, and they scrap the bill. Give me a fucking break. This is not journalism. This is lapdog hackery and attack bullshit. This is propaganda. So far, we've had the LA Times do this. Who else have we had? Now it's Politico. What are the other outlets that have attacked him? I think the New York Times did something on him. The New York Times actually had a reporter following Spencer throughout DC. He's a very decent guy, actually. I really liked him. I won't name him. Might actually be a female. So they're going to be doing a feature on Spencer, and it's going to be interesting to see how they do it. Now, they're not doing it from their living room like this odd lady is. And by the way, she's a climate reporter. She's a climate reporter. I don't know why is she talking about Spencer Pratt and housing bills if she's a climate reporter? It's unbelievable. Obviously, it's just an ideological hit piece. But it's going to be interesting to see what the New York Times does. Because unlike everybody else who doesn't spend any time around Spencer, this guy was actually hanging out with Spencer and following. Now, he wasn't allowed to go into some of the meetings that we went into, but he was around for a bunch of the stuff that we were doing and got a chance to actually observe Spencer in the wild, in the flesh, and see what a charming, charismatic, and genuine person he is. He is one of the most genuine people I've ever seen, ever. He is absolutely himself. And when I was filming him, I'm like, hey man, just let me know if you want me to stop recording. He's like, dude, I would never say anything that I don't want out there to billions of people. I expect everything that I say to land on billions of ears. So I would never say anything that I don't believe. This is why it's so frustrating to watch all this stuff. I'm not trying to make this always the Spencer show, but the reality is he's the only show in town. He's the only person actually making an impact with this stuff. And it's just shameful the way the press treats him. So I look forward to seeing that New York Times piece. I really do. Because as much as I've criticized New York Times, like I said, I try to be as fair as I can. And they're doing the right thing. They're actually spending some time. They've embedded a journalist who's a very decent man, very, very kind guy, and seems very intelligent, seems like a great writer. And so I think, it may not be favorable, but as long as it's just genuine and it's not like a cheap shot, like all this stuff is, then I think that's cool. It's cool. I look forward to reading it. So that's going to be something interesting. It's going to be a pretty legit piece. The real interesting thing is going to be what headline are the editors going to stamp on it? Because that the editors, oftentimes they'll take a journalist's piece of work and then put this really deceptive headline on it just to make it really sting, because most people don't read past the headlines. It's just sort of like wiping their taint all over this journalist's work. So hopefully they don't do that, but there's only one way to find out. So anyway, that's all I got for you guys tonight. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with this Senate investigation. I'm sure a lot of you guys didn't realize that the feds pick up the tab for basically all of California's major wildfires. I don't think anybody realizes that. This is why I'm always complaining about Gavin Newsom, because this level of dereliction where they don't take care of a problem that's preventable, they're not doing their homework, and then they're getting bailed out by other states. It's so unfair and it's so craven. I absolutely hate it. So anyway, not much in the chat. It's Friday night. People have something better to do, unlike me. I got nothing better to do than to yell at a camera. But hopefully you guys got something out of it tonight. Remember, in this dystopian world of AI, the only way to prove you're human is to do it live.